Welcome to Night Stories, where shadows whisper, nightmares crawl, and every tale drags you deeper into the dark. If you dare to listen, leave the lights off and let the night begin. I have to tell you this now before I lose my nerve. Once I start, you won't be able to walk away. That's how it was for me. The truth about Area 51 isn't what you think, and it's far worse than any rumor you've heard whispered in drunken bars or conspiracies posted online. Forget the blurry photos and half-baked theories. Those are a distraction. What we keep buried out in the desert is real, and I have touched it, smelled it, and seen it breathe. I started working there 3 years ago. The contract was vague, promising high pay and classified research opportunities, but it required total secrecy. The men who recruited me wore blank faces, and when they spoke, their words were as dry as sand. I signed without hesitation. Who wouldn't? The idea of being inside the most secretive base on Earth thrilled me. But the thrill died the moment I walked down the first hallway. The air was different underground. Stale, metallic, with a faint sweetness that reminded me of rotting fruit. The walls were blindingly white, lined with thick glass panels behind which things floated. Shapes too quick for my eyes to catch at first. The silence pressed on me, broken only by the low hum of hidden machinery. We weren't allowed to carry phones, cameras, or even pens. Nothing came in and nothing came out. Only memories, and even those were supposed to be buried under layers of fear. The first time I saw them, I froze. They weren't like the little green men cartoons make you laugh about. They were taller, thin to the point of looking breakable, with skin so pale it almost glowed under the fluorescent lights. Veins pulsed visibly across their elongated skulls and their eyes. Christ, their eyes. They weren't just black, they seemed endless, like two pits sucking the light out of the room. When one blinked at me, its lids closed from the sides, not up and down. It tilted its head, studying me the way a hawk studies a mouse before striking. The ships were worse. They were housed in enormous hangars carved deep into the rock. Smooth, seamless discs, darker than obsidian, with surfaces that seemed to ripple when you got too close. No rivets, no panels, nothing you could call construction, just a shape that felt alive. Some of them hummed, a low vibration that made my teeth chatter. Others stayed utterly still, but when you brushed your hand across them, warmth spread up your arm, almost like a pulse. I never wanted to touch them, but they made us. Everything here was mandatory. The experiments began almost immediately. We strapped the creatures down onto steel tables, though they never fought us. They just watched, eyes wide and wet, following every move. When the scalpels cut into their skin, there was no blood, just a clear, viscous fluid that smelled like burned plastic. Their insides were a tangle of slick cords and sacs, twitching as though alive on their own. I'll never forget the sound one of them made when we sliced too deep, like a choir screaming into my skull. My ears bled that night, and so did the ears of every man in the room. But the worst was when we went deeper. There was one ship, smaller than the others, no bigger than a pickup truck, that responded when touched. We brought it into Lab 6, sealed the doors, and lined the walls with monitoring equipment. It sat there, silent, until one of the scientists placed his hand on its surface. The ship opened, not with a door, but with a sudden folding of reality. The metal peeled back like skin, revealing an interior that was wrong. Wasn't space inside. It was depth. Shadows spiraled down into a place that couldn't fit inside the size of the ship. The air smelled like rust and decay, and faint whispers echoed from within, voices that didn't belong to any living throat. We sent drones in, but none returned. The ship closed itself again after 30 minutes, and when we pried it back open days later, the inside had changed. The shadows were gone, replaced by walls that pulsed like muscle. That was when the accidents began. One of the guards went missing during a night shift. Cameras showed him standing by the ship, staring at it as though hypnotized. Then he walked forward, pressed his hand to the surface, and vanished into it. No flash, no struggle, just gone. The ship sealed immediately after. We never saw him again, but sometimes at night, when the base was quiet, we heard his voice over the intercom, crying for help from channels that weren't even wired. We didn't stop the experiments. Orders came from above, faceless voices telling us to push further, peel back the layers. find out what made these things tick. We injected them with chemicals, burned them with radiation, cut off their limbs to see if they would grow back. Sometimes they did. One specimen, classified as E17, regenerated an entire arm overnight, but it wasn't the same arm. It was longer, jointed in too many places, with claw-like fingers that scratched endlessly against the restraints. The next morning, every single light in the facility flickered for hours, and when they came back on, half of our data servers had been wiped clean. I began to notice something else too. The aliens watched us not with fear, but with patience. Every slice of the blade, every injection, every flash of a scalpel reflected in their eyes as though they were memorizing it all. One evening, as I leaned over E17's table, its lips moved. They'd never spoken before. The words weren't clear, but they slid into my mind anyway. "You are opening doors you cannot close." Staggered back, but the others hadn't heard. To them, the room was silent. They laughed when I told them, said I was cracking under pressure. But I swear to you, the thing knew my name. And then the dreams began. I woke each night drenched in sweat, my sheets soaked, the taste of metal on my tongue. In the dreams, I was standing inside the ship, the smaller one, staring down into that impossible depth. Hands, long, pale hands, rose from the darkness, wrapping around my limbs, pulling me down. I could hear the screams of the guard who disappeared, only now he wasn't begging for help. He was laughing. Each morning I found bruises on my wrists and ankles shaped like fingers. I told myself it was stress, that my mind was breaking under the weight of the horrors I'd seen. But then one morning, I saw something in the mirror that stripped away the last of my denial. My pupils were wider than they should have been, almost black. And when I blinked, my eyelids closed from the sides. The day it all fell apart started like any other. I was sitting in the observation room, the walls lined with thick glass, staring down at E17. Its new limb twitched against the restraints like a spider testing its web. The air was heavier than usual, humming faintly as if the base itself were holding its breath. I remember thinking how wrong it felt. The place was never warm, but that morning sweat prickled my skin, and every fluorescent light buzzed louder than it should. The alarms went off without warning, a shriek of metal and sirens that rattled the glass. The red lights stuttered to life, washing everything in pulsing crimson. Through the glass I saw one of the other specimens, E12, sit up on its table. It hadn't moved in weeks, not since we'd severed its spine to test neurological responses. But now it sat upright, restraints snapping like paper. Its eyes glowed, black pits burning with wet shine, and it turned its head toward me. The intercom crackled with voices shouting orders, containment breach in Sector D, lockdown protocols. Then the sound of gunfire, stuttering bursts swallowed by a deeper roar. Something not human. My supervisor slammed into the room, face pale, shouting at us to stay put. But even as he spoke, the glass wall shivered, lines crawling across its surface like veins. E17 opened its mouth and screamed. Not sound. Not exactly. It was pressure, a wall of force that punched through my skull and made my teeth feel like they were splitting. Blood sprayed from my nose and ears. My supervisor collapsed, convulsing, his eyes rolling back. I staggered to the console, slamming my hand against the release button without thinking. The door hissed open, and I stumbled into the hallway, desperate to escape that vibration drilling into my bones. I should have stayed. God help me, I should have stayed. The hallways were chaos. Soldiers in black armor ran past, rifles clutched tight, barking into radios that spat nothing but static. A scream tore through the air, high, sharp, cut off in an instant. When I turned the corner, I saw what was left of the scream. A guard's body was plastered to the wall, chest split open, his ribs peeled outward like fingers. Something pale and slick moved inside him, writhing, pushing, until a long limb forced its way free and tore through his throat. It wasn't one of them, it was something new. The limb slithered out, followed by a head too narrow, with a jaw that unhinged like a snake's. The thing stood over the shredded corpse, trembling as though adjusting to its body. Then it let out a gurgle, half laugh, half scream, before vanishing in a blur of speed down the corridor. Gunfire erupted from around the bend, followed by wet tearing noises and silence. I ran. Every hall I turned down was worse than the last. Glass shattered, alarms drowned out by screams. One of the hangars had been breached. The massive doors warped inward as though pulled by invisible hands. The ship inside pulsed, its surface rippling like water in a storm. Men were dragged into it one by one, their screams cutting short as the black surface swallowed them whole. For a second, their faces bulged against the metal, stretching outward, mouths frozen wide before they sank back in. I stumbled back, clutching my head, whispering to myself that none of this was real. That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Cold, thin fingers curled around my skin. I turned and saw E-17. Wasn't restrained anymore. Its head tilted, eyes glistening, that impossible blackness sucking me in. It didn't attack. It just looked at me, lips twitching, and I heard the words inside my skull, not with my ears. You open the doors, now we walk through. Behind it, others were rising from their tables. Some moved wrong, joints bending in directions bones shouldn't allow. Others crawled on all fours, their elongated fingers slapping against the tile with wet smacks. The lights flickered overhead, plunging everything into stuttering frames of red and dark. A soldier came barreling down the hall, rifle raised. Before he could fire, one of the creatures lashed out, its arm stretching far beyond its length, bones snapping through flesh as it wrapped around his throat. It lifted him effortlessly, shaking him until his head tore free. Blood sprayed across the ceiling, dripping onto my face as I crouched low, gagging. The soldier's body dropped beside me, still twitching. His eyes locked on mine, lips mouthing silent words. I swear he whispered help me even though his throat was gone. I crawled backwards, my palms slipping on blood. E-17 stepped closer, crouching to my level. Its mouth opened, and I saw rows of teeth I hadn't noticed before. Tiny, jagged, like shards of glass. And then it did something I can never erase from my mind. It smiled. The base was falling apart around me. Metal groaning, gunfire distant, the smell of burning flesh choking the air. Somewhere deeper, the smaller ship, the one that opened, was alive again. I could feel it calling. A pull in my chest like a hook dragging me forward. The whispers grew louder, layering over each other, familiar voices mixed with alien tones. The missing guard, my supervisor, even my own voice laughing. I stumbled to my feet and ran, ignoring the creatures swarming behind me. The hall split ahead, one path toward the surface elevators, the other toward the lower labs where the ship waited. My legs chose for me, carrying me downward even as every part of me screamed to run for the exit. I couldn't stop. It was inside me now, dragging me deeper. And as I reached the final steel door, the lights flickered once more. For a second, in the reflection of the glass, I didn't see myself. I saw one of them. The steel door groaned open and the stench hit me first, thick metallic like blood left out in the sun. The lower labs weren't supposed to smell like that. They were cold, sterile, a place of glass and humming machines. Now they were something else. The floor was slick, glistening under the emergency lights, and each step made a wet squelch that echoed far too loud in the silence. I moved carefully, back pressed against the wall, gripping the pistol I'd stolen from the dead guard. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd never fired a weapon before, and the weight of it felt useless against what I had seen. Still, holding it gave me the illusion of control. The whispers grew louder the deeper I went. Not just voices, but layered sounds, like children laughing, people sobbing, metal twisting, animals snarling, all tangled together into one endless murmur. They weren't coming from the intercoms anymore. They were in the walls, in the floor, in my chest. I passed the first lab on my left and I stopped cold. The glass was shattered, and the inside looked wrong. The walls pulsed, slick with something black that dripped like tar. The equipment was bent into impossible shapes. Monitors stretched and twisted like taffy, cords slithering across the floor like veins. A body was plastered to the ceiling, skin peeled back and spread wide like a grotesque bat, ribs quivering as though trying to breathe. Its eyes rolled to meet mine, lips trembling, and I recognized him, Dr. Harlow, one of the surgeons. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, jaw dislocating until it cracked wide. But no scream came out. Just silence. I stumbled back and kept moving. Deeper into the corridor, the lights flickered, and for a moment the hall stretched longer than it should have, vanishing into blackness. When the light steadied, the walls looked closer, as if the building itself was shrinking. My breath came in short gasps. I couldn't tell if the base was collapsing or reshaping itself. That's when I heard the first set of footsteps. They were wet, slapping, not boots. Flesh. I froze, heart hammering, straining to listen. The sound came from behind me, steady and deliberate, matching my breath. I raised the pistol, turned slowly, and saw nothing but the empty, flickering hall. Then the lights went out. I heard it moving then, fast, skittering across the walls, the ceiling. Too many limbs scraping metal. My finger squeezed the trigger, and the muzzle flash illuminated it for half a heartbeat. A pale shape clinging to the ceiling, its mouth yawning open into a vertical slit filled with quivering teeth. The shot went wide, but the blast drove it back into the shadows. I didn't wait, I ran. The hall twisted downward, deeper into the facility. The temperature dropped, my breath fogging in front of me, the smell of rot growing sharper. I reached a security door half hanging from its frame, claw marks gouged deep into the steel. I slipped through and froze. I was in the ship chamber. The smaller craft stood in the center, but it wasn't dormant anymore. Its surface pulsed like living flesh, veins glowing faintly under the black skin. The air around it shimmered, bending light like heat, and the floor vibrated under my feet. I could hear screams coming from inside it, not faint, not imagined, but clear voices of men and women begging, crying, pounding as though trapped within the walls of the thing. And then I saw the survivors. A handful of soldiers and scientists were huddled behind overturned equipment at the far end of the chamber, rifles aimed at the ship. Their faces were pale, eyes wide. One man rocking back and forth, whispering over and over. I started toward them, relief breaking through my fear, but before I could call out, the ship opened. The surface peeled away like skin, folding outward to reveal the inside. It wasn't a room. It was a void. An impossible space of twisting flesh and shadows that breathed in and out. Shapes moved within it, some human, some not. One soldier screamed and opened fire, bullets vanishing into the black. The recoil echoed like thunder, but the ship didn't react. Instead, something reached out. A pale arm, long and jointed in too many places, slithered through the opening and seized him. He fired wildly, the rounds tearing chunks from the wall, but he was dragged inside in a blink. His scream cut off instantly, though the echoes of it continued inside the ship, bouncing endlessly like a recording stuck on repeat. The rest of the soldiers opened fire. I dropped behind a console as sparks and gunfire lit the chamber. The air grew thick, vibrating with energy. The whispers rose into shrieks, drowning out everything else. The walls of the chamber rippled like water, black veins spreading from the ship into the floor. And then the lights died again. Screams filled the dark. Gunshots stuttered, then went silent one by one, replaced by tearing wet crunches. I fired blindly into the black, every shot deafening, every flash revealing only fragments, limbs stretching across the room, jaws yawning wider than heads should allow, human faces twisted into shapes I couldn't understand. Something heavy slammed into the console above me, splattering me with hot, thick liquid. I didn't look. I just ran again, stumbling through the dark, sliding in blood, until I crashed through another doorway. The door sealed behind me, locking me in total silence. I collapsed against it, pistol empty, chest heaving. My hands shook violently, the sticky warmth of someone else's blood drying on my face. For a few seconds I thought I'd escaped. Then I noticed the walls in this room. They were breathing, slow, steady expansions and contractions, as though the entire chamber was a lung. The lights flickered to life overhead, dim and sickly, and I saw that the walls weren't walls at all. They were flesh. Pulsing veins ran through them, dripping a clear fluid. The floor twitched under me, and in the far corner something stirred. It was a man once. His lab coat was shredded, face pale, but his body was merging into the wall itself. His skin stretched into the flesh, veins tangled with the veins of the room. His mouth opened, but no words came, just a wet gurgle as his jaw unhinged, the inside of his throat black and endless. He raised a hand toward me, fingers trembling, and with his last breath he whispered, "It wants you inside." The wall behind him split open like a wound, and it was still bleeding. The wall yawned open behind him, wet flesh splitting wide with a sound like paper tearing underwater. The stench poured out, thick, rotten, heavy enough to choke me. The scientist's body sagged, half fused to the wall, his arm stretching like taffy until it snapped free and was absorbed into the pulsing meat. I stumbled back, gagging, clawing at the door behind me, but it wouldn't open. My fingers slipped on the blood still coating my skin. The gash in the wall twitched wider, veins writhing like worms, something shifting just beyond the opening. I ran. Not through the door, it was sealed. Not into the wound, it wanted that. I spotted a maintenance ladder in the corner, leading upward into a shaft lit by a faint red glow. My body moved before my mind could argue. I bolted for it, boots slapping against the twitching floor, and started climbing. The wall screamed, not the ship, the wall itself. The sound was human and not human at once, 1,000 throats bellowing in layered agony. The ladder vibrated in my grip, rattling like it was about to shake loose. Below me, the gash split wider, and something pale began to slither through. Too many limbs, glistening wet, bending like broken sticks. I climbed faster. My muscles burned, lungs on fire, but I didn't look down. I couldn't. The shaft twisted, narrowing, the metal smeared with black handprints. Some of them were too big to belong to anything human. Finally, I reached a hatch. I slammed my shoulder into it once, twice, until the lock cracked and I spilled out onto another corridor. The air here was different, colder, sharper, not filled with that suffocating rot. But it wasn't safe. Nothing was safe. The corridor was littered with bodies. Soldiers, scientists, guards, torn open, split apart, strung across the walls like grotesque ornaments. Their faces were still moving, mouths twitching, eyes darting, as though some fragment of them was still alive. One woman's lips quivered, whispering endlessly, but her voice was gone. Only air wheezed through her throat. The elevator to the surface was ahead. I sprinted, slipping in blood, ignoring the twitching hands that reached weakly from the floor. My pistol was empty, useless, so I tossed it aside. The elevator loomed like salvation, its doors open. The panel glowed faintly, blessedly alive. I slammed my fist against the controls. The doors shuddered, squealed, then slid closed just as something slammed into them from the other side. A screeching howl vibrated through the steel, bending it inward as if the creature outside was peeling it open with invisible fingers. I screamed and mashed the buttons until the lift lurched upward, metal groaning as it carried me away from the nightmare below. I thought I was safe. For a second, I believed it. Then the lights in the elevator flickered. The walls quivered just slightly like something alive was pressing from the other side. The metal felt warm against my back. A whisper slid into my ear, my own voice laughing. "You can't leave. You're part of it now." I slammed my head against the wall, desperate to drown it out. I screamed until my throat shredded, until the elevator jolted and screeched, finally grinding to a halt. The doors opened with a slow, agonizing creak. The desert. Cool night air hit me like salvation. Stars sprawled overhead, so wide, so clean, so empty. I staggered out, falling to my knees in the sand, sobbing, retching, clutching handfuls of dirt just to feel something real. Behind me, the elevator sat silent. The desert wind howled across the dunes. For the first time in what felt like years, there was no whispering, no screams, no walls that breathed. I staggered to my feet and ran. I don't know how far, how long, but eventually I saw headlights in the distance. A convoy, military vehicles rumbling across the sand. I waved, screamed, collapsed in front of them. Boots surrounded me, rifles raised, voices shouting. I don't remember much after that. I woke in a medical tent, IVs in my arms, a soldier sitting silently in the corner. They didn't ask me questions. They didn't need to. The look in his eyes told me everything. He knew. I wasn't the first to make it out, but I might be the last, because at night even now I hear them, in the stillness between breaths, in the silence of empty rooms. I hear the ship humming, pulsing, whispering. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I don't see darkness. I see the void inside the ship stretching forever, filled with pale hands reaching for me. And worst of all, I feel myself reaching back. Thank you for listening. Hope you didn't get too scared. If you want to listen more stories, check out my channel. Please leave a like and subscribe. It means the whole world to me.